Melanoma Matters is an educational resource. The content represents our opinions and does not constitute medical advice. If you're a patient with questions specific to your situation, please consult your medical practitioner. Welcome to Melanoma Matters. I'm James Larkin.
I'm Sapna Patel.
So today we're going to be talking about the SCANDIUM 2 and CHOPIN studies. So this is metastatic uveal melanoma, looking at local regional treatment as well as systemic treatment. So before we start, icebreaker warm-up question. What was your last dream? And if you can't remember, you'll have to make something up.
No, I wouldn't dare make up a dream. I actually did have one this weekend. I don't remember it. I remember thinking, wow, it's funny. We just talked about dreams and I had one. And now I can't even place what it was. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you can have REM sleep and not dream. Yeah. I think the question is the extent to which you remember it. And obviously I agree as well about deep sleep and REM, but you know, the whole dream thing's fun. Right, so tell us about these studies. Why are we doing them together? And what are the take-homes?
I mean, I feel obligated in a disease that has such limited treatment options. We've got a couple of approved agents. We've got checkpoint inhibitor that we can certainly use for this disease. One of the obvious things is, do we combine liver-directed with systemic therapy? And so the CHOPIN, SCANDIUM, and SCANDIUM 2 trials, first of all, are incredible efforts from our European colleagues, combining liver-directed, essentially this hepatic perfusion, whether it's isolated or percutaneous, with checkpoint blockade. And I really liked that they tackled this combination. One, just from a safety standpoint, you know, is it safe to combine these therapies? And two, they all of them were looking at either a different sequence or something or the other. So just briefly, the CHOPIN study, which was led by Ellen Kaptein, single center study out of Leiden, Netherlands, where they combined the melphalan percutaneous hepatic perfusion, hepatic delivery system with ipi/nivo in uveal melanoma frontline treatment. And, you know, all of these trials where they use liver-directed therapy often will limit it to liver only or liver predominant. And there's just usually some feeling that let's just make sure we don't have more disease outside the liver. And the bottom line is, you know, it was a study of, I think, just 7 patients or so. I can verify, but they were able to, you know, do it at a single center and look at things like safety, toxicity, progression-free survival. And on the basis of this CHOPIN, they have developed a follow-up study. So, you know, I think it's cool that they looked at this. The way they did it, if I'm not mistaken, was essentially concomitant. So they gave ipi/nivo systemically while they were periodically giving this hepatic perfusion system. The SCANDIUM and SCANDIUM 2 trials, the SCANDIUM was a 93 patient trial, 87 patients assigned to either IHP or control. So I guess really 87 patients because a few dropped out, but the IHP, again, this melphalan IHP or control, and they were just looking at efficacy, and the IHP treatment, so this melphalan treatment, was superior response rate, hepatic progression-free survival, and very quickly, you know, our dear colleague Roger Olafsson-Bagge then made the SCANDIUM 2 trial. And he's very kind to say he looked at some of the neoadjuvant stuff we had been doing in cutaneous melanoma and took a cue from that. So this study, SCANDIUM 2, was combining this hepatic perfusion of melphalan with ipi/nivo. And it was essentially randomization to, they got their IHP followed by ipi/nivo, so a post-IHP ipi/nivo, or a peri-procedural ipi/nivo. So one dose of ipi/nivo, then IHP, and then 3 cycles of ipi-nivo post-procedure. Again, a small study here. This one was 18 patients, 3 who didn't end up getting the IHP. But it's nice that he was able to design a study like this and throughout Sweden essentially put patients on this approach of combining checkpoint. The bottom line is, looking at safety and tolerability and also just moderately, is one sequence better than the other? Is giving it after the procedure or sandwiching? Should you prime the liver? Is it kind of still unknown? And he has some interesting conclusions. I encourage people to look at his ASCO poster and read this paper for some of the conclusions he draws as to why maybe one approach may not be optimal in this patient population. But the bottom line is, it's reasonable to start thinking of combining systemic with liver-directed. I think the next obvious question is, what about TEBI? How do you sequence something like TEBI with this? And then, low-hanging fruit is, can we swap out the melphalan for something else? Although arguably, it's a dear friend calling, one of the things that you mentioned with the melphalan discussion is, this idea of saturating at a dose level that gets high enough where you actually could see dose responsiveness. So maybe melphalan's not that uninteresting if you use it in the right way, like something like this delivery system.
So what's the next steps, and what about the kind of the rarity? I mean, the disease in the first place, does that mean we should be sort of trying to think about adaptive trials, for example, rather than, lots of trials over, a period of time? If we think there's a set of questions that could be tackled in one trial, do you think it's feasible or not?
Well, it's good in theory. I think the problem is in a rare cancer, I had a good word for this in my head as you were asking it. It's already escaped me, but just the ability of all of these places to design a trial like that with an adaptive design, to get on board, to have access to the same treatment arms, and then to be able to kind of open it for this rare population. I just think it's great on paper. I think operationally we would have a hard time. That's why you haven't seen a cooperative group trial really with uveal melanoma in a long time. And fingers crossed, Paul Nathan's got something going for this through ERTC for uveal melanoma. I think next steps for liver-directed and systemic, I believe there's a Scandium 3 trial that's received funding, the design of which, escapes me, so I'm the wrong person to know what that looks like, but exciting to know there's something. And then I also think there's a CHOPIN 2, again, combining, checkpoint with this melphalan system to the liver. So I think these groups are picking that up and moving that forward, which is great, because obviously we need to know, is sequencing this just, the sum of the parts? You could do each therapy individually and get the same as when you sequence it, or do this concomitant approach. And then certainly toxicity becomes a real issue with these liver-directed and systemic therapies.
Okay, so again, if there's not too much else to say, I mean, these are all great efforts, aren't they, by the investigators? These aren't easy trials to do in several different ways. And I mean, I'm not an expert in this disease, but it just feels like they're really being quite creative about what they're doing and how they're thinking about things. So certainly for me, kudos. I don't know what you think.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's not lost on me. I'm not exactly the expert, but it's not lost on me that these are not US trials. These are European investigators who said, you know what, here's a liver-directed and here's systemic, and we can get these specialties under, one trial and combined. I think that's really impressive. And we should take a lesson in the US and maybe consider designing some of these ourselves as well, or jumping on board with these. So well done.
If we can solve the international academic sponsorship issues, but let's let's not end there. Let's end smiling anyway. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.